Okay, guys, I just left the gym, and we all know notoriously the gym is where we see a lot of ego lifting. And for those who aren't aware, ego lifting is just trying to lift weights that are heavier than you should be lifting, almost sometimes to the detriment of yourself, just to make yourself feel better. Now, I'm all for, pushing the limits at times and being able to say, I had like a new personal record or something. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are way out of form when they're lifting, swinging their back, putting other parts of their body in jeopardy of injury for trying to just load on heavy weights, thinking that that's going to get them to where they need to be sooner. Now, my point with this is, while we often talk about ego lifting, a lot of you are ego living. And I'm sure you'll hear it in this term, living within your means. A lot of people are ego living and not living within their means. That means that car that you have and that payment attached to it, it's all for ego. It's sucking up more resources that you earn than you actually need to be expending out. The insurance on it, the upkeep, the maintenance, and what's it generally all for? The brand name on it. Same thing with clothing, designer clothing, high-end expensive things, trips that you may not need to take, locations you don't need to travel to. I'm not saying we can't earn those things as rewards, but sometimes we are just ego living, and you put yourself at risk. The same way, if you put way too much weight on and try to squat it, you can hurt your back, you can hurt your knees, your hips, your neck, you can hurt a lot of things. You can hurt yourself long-term doing that. Well, you can hurt yourself long-term with the way you spend your credit, not building it up, tearing it down just for certain things. Now, if you're going to school or trying to better yourself and there's an investment in that, I'm all for that and I understand that. But even then, you still have to be smart with what you're doing. A lot of times you just got to work the system. And when I say the system, how you are addressing these things, how you are going to game plan for the successes that you want to have, rather than just saying, I'm gonna pile it all on now and do it. Most of the time, that doesn't work. And most people who have lifted heavy weights, done world records, made their millions, whatever it is that they found success in, it didn't come from just rushing a process. It came from being patient, studying it, understanding what it takes to lift more, what it takes to earn more, what it takes to build your credit. All of those things are parts of diminishing the ego living and lifting. Both. It diminishes both of them. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Let me see if I can turn on a light, because it's still pretty dark out this morning. Not too dark, but so I just don't want to see people hurt themselves physically. And this is the same thing I would tell somebody in the gym if they ask, hey man, lighten your load. You don't have to lift that much just to try to prove a point to yourself or anybody else. Same thing with the spending. Hey, cut that spending down. Like all the meals that you're eating out, and it can be something simple. It doesn't have to mean you have an exotic car. Eating out every day, that will be a part of ego, because we're looking at things like, well, I don't have the time for it, so I have the ability just to go and buy this. There's a little ego in that. No, sit home, humble yourself, go to the store, make some sandwiches or whatever it is that you buy every day, prep it at home. Prep it at home. There's nothing wrong with that. And you take away from that spending, and when you realize that every day you're spending, let's say, $6 to $9. Well, if you work 5 days a week, that's up to $54. That's a little over $200 a month. And then so forth and so on. You do the math. I'm not a mathematician, but if you do that, there's a couple thousand in there, I would imagine, at least, that you are spending out annually that you don't need to. It's ego driven. And that's not including like drinks that you go out if you're hanging out with friends, or how much you entertain yourself. All of these things can be really put in place to where it's lessened. I'm not saying you have to completely cut it out. It's like, I'm not telling people to stop going to the gym. What I'm saying is be smart when you go. So ego lifting, ego living, what are your thoughts? Just something that came to me while I was in the gym today. And I'm really trying to be more purposeful when I talk about passing things on as far as money, financial advice. And I don't have a lot of it, but the little bits that I've experienced and had successes with is what I would say that I have to share. And you're going to find other people who have way more experience than I do, and that's awesome. But it's one of those things. So I've been talking to the younger guys at my job. Build your credit, find out what your credit score is first, and then work on building that. Get into the 401k, cut down those extra expenditures if you don't need to be spending on them, and be able to get yourself something of your own. Same thing with the car. If you're going to get a car, the one I'm in right now was not fresh off the lot. There's no reason to. It's a depreciating asset, and for those who can do that, that's great. But for a lot of us, we don't need to be ego living. That would have been crazy for me. And so don't compare yourself to the actual wealthy. Compare yourself to the you that you could be, whether you are not spending as much or if you had kept spending more. If I had gone out and bought a new car, the insurance would have been higher. Again, maybe not the maintenance quite up front, but depending on what kind of car, but I would have been stuck with a payment every month. And that would have hurt what I'm doing right now as far as my savings and how I'm earning. So even though you can afford it, why always be like right at the edge of something? Have some cushion. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. The house that I have, it's not huge, but it fits what I need. And that's the important part. I'd be crazy to go buy a house just to impress other people. That's wild. That's a wild thought. Ego living. That's all it is. And if you're not sure, ask the sensible people in your life, the ones that you look at and be like, man, I can't believe they've, had the same pair of shoes for 2 years or whatever it is. Ask those people. Ask the sensible people in your lives a little bit more about their finances or their thoughts on it before you dive into that car, that house, that luxury apartment, any of that stuff where you can easily do yourself a favor and not put yourself in any sort of jeopardy. Just like you would ask the people that you see in the gym, like, oh man, they are lifting and they're doing their thing and they look great and I've seen them work. Yeah, you can go ask them, or you ask the people who work at your gym. That's the same thing as asking a financial advisor. You can call. There's financial advisors you can call and set up an appointment and really get an idea and study and come to understand what it's going to be, especially for younger guys. I know I wasn't told that stuff because credit has changed from the time I was young. It seemed like the credit card was like the boogeyman. You didn't use it unless there was a massive emergency. Now people are using credit cards just, because they want dinner. And it's a different day. So that sort of thing changed. And I understand that. So I don't look at like, oh, my generation, that my parents' generation failed me by not telling me. No, credit was a different thing back then. But the way I understand it and the way that it has worked for me now, that's what I'm passing on. So that's what I try to pass on to other people. So I'm just kind of the guy in the gym. You might just, hey, those are dumbbells and those are cables and I can tell you some basic stuff. But if you really want that information, if you really want to set yourself up for long-term success, do it the right way. I know I've spoken to it a little bit before firsthand. I had a boss years ago when I was in my early 20s, and he would give me a ride to the bus stop and all that stuff. He really took me under his wing. He told me about the 401k. That's how I got into it. And all these years later, I have a good chunk saved, and it's not my only 401k. We can get into rolling 401ks together and all that other stuff at a different time, and that might be something somebody more qualified than me would speak to. But guys, it's a simple place to start. Don't ego live. Don't ego lift. Don't ego live. Do within your means. Stay smart. Stay humble. Don't worry about the other people who are going to say something about your car, your apartment. They're not paying for it. They're not paying for it. And I can tell you, when I was like one of the first friends that I had in my group that had his own apartment. It was a little, dirt hole of an apartment, but it was mine. It was mine, and guess who was always knocking at my door? All my friends who still lived with their parents in nice big houses. They had cars. I didn't have anything, but they wanted to be in my spot because there was something about what I had was transcending what they were still doing. Didn't mean that they were, I was better than them. It just means I got there first. And there's like a pride about that. And I didn't worry about it. And truthfully, your real friends aren't going to knock what you have. If they see that you've worked and hustled for it, they're not going to knock you for it. The ones who do, get them out of the way. And that's what I did with a lot of friends. People would come to my place and be disrespectful or not pick up after themselves or whatever. Guess what? Next time I knew they were knocking at that door, I didn't answer. You have that ability to do that. I know I'm drifting, but my point is there's power in that as well. And long term, there's power in your lifting correctly. Slow it down, put your reps together, lift the weight that you can, and stay patient. Same thing with your earning. Slow down the spending. Do what you need to do. Think smart. Ask the people who are around you who have been a little bit more frugal, and be patient. It'll pay off. It's not a failing technique. So I'm gonna leave it at that. What are your thoughts? Ace up the sleeve, advice, comment, experience. And I know that there's a bunch of you out there who have experienced something very similar to what I'm talking about. Please leave it in the comments. For anybody else, I'd love to hear it. And I hope this finds everybody in your place, pursuit, or beginnings of total health, mind, body, and soul. Peace, love, unity, solidarity, and as always, subscriptions and video. Stick around.